Buonasera. Siamo qui in Zona K per dare il via a questa serie di incontri che abbiamo intitolato Reality, punto di domanda, 4 dialoghi sul teatro contemporaneo. E comincio col salutare gli ospiti che sono qui insieme a noi per dare voce a tutti i contenuti della serata. Comincio col salutare JENS HILLJE, che è collegato in remoto da Berlino. Buonasera JENS.
Ciao, buonasera.
E che è l'ospite principale della serata. E Sara Chiappori, collegata in remoto da Milano. Ciao Sara.
Buonasera, buonasera a tutti, bentrovati.
E Renata Viola, che è qui accanto a me. Sara e Renata hanno curato insieme tutti i contenuti e le scelte di questa serie di dialoghi. Sono ovviamente degli incontri che avremmo voluto fare in presenza con tutti gli ospiti qui a Zona K insieme al pubblico e che la situazione ci ha spinto a modificare in questo formato, ma siamo molto contenti di riuscire a portarli a termine in qualche modo. Comunque, in un grande esperimento. Questo progetto è partito dalla volontà di ragionare sul lavoro fatto a Zona K negli ultimi anni. In particolare negli ultimi 3 anni, che sono forse i 3 anni in cui tutte le modalità di lavorare sperimentate nel periodo precedente si sono definite al meglio. Sicuramente in questi 3 anni è stata confermata l'attenzione a quelle che sono le eccellenze del teatro contemporaneo europeo e internazionale, accanto a artisti italiani emergenti che hanno modalità di lavoro che ci piacciono molto, insomma, che interagiscono con il reale come ci piace. Ma soprattutto si è confermata il nostro particolare interesse al presente e al rapporto tra il teatro e la realtà. Zona K parte cioè nella sua programmazione soprattutto dai contenuti. È come se ogni anno individuassimo un tema che riteniamo in quel momento urgente, saliente per quello che sta accadendo nel mondo, quello che sta accadendo a noi nel panorama teatrale milanese, e quel tema diventa il titolo portante della stagione che viene poi declinata in focus tematici. Il 2018 per esempio portava il titolo Power, potere, il 2019 il titolo Economy, il 2020 il titolo Reality. E questi 3 grandi titoli annuali vengono declinati in focus tematici che guidano la scelta di tutti gli artisti e dei contenuti da trattare all'interno di quel focus. Ne cito solo alcuni che sono ad esempio Money, Ecology, Technology, People, Cities. Sono alcuni dei titoli dei focus che abbiamo scelto negli anni trascorsi. Nell'attenzione al presente e alla realtà siamo andati a cercare in un mondo di artisti, in un mondo di autori che da molta parte dei critici viene definito il teatro della realtà. Autori ed artisti che cioè si confrontano direttamente con la realtà o agendola direttamente, quindi spettacoli urbani che usano la realtà non solo come scenografia ma come realtà da toccare, da interagire, da abitare con i corpi, o teatri di spettacoli di stampo documentaristico e non solo, o spettacoli che inglobano pezzi di realtà, esperti, contenuti, spettatori, persone, e li coinvolgono come autori, come attori o come giocatori, non di rado. Non è un caso che il 2020, che chiude questa trilogia, portasse il titolo Reality, proprio ad andare a dire il 2020 è l'anno che chiude un triennio e una modalità di procedere univoca in qualche modo. Ovviamente all'inizio del 2020 è arrivata la pandemia e la maggior parte degli spettacoli programmati sono saltati, tanto che nel tentativo di riprendere la stagione nell'autunno, per il quale abbiamo ripensato tutta una serie di spettacoli pensati ad hoc per la situazione attuale, quindi non soltanto compatibili con le regole sanitarie attuali, ma anche che andassero in qualche modo a parlare della situazione in cui ci troviamo. Questa stagione autunnale è stata comunque interrotta dopo 2 o 3 settimane dalla sua partenza, ma portava il titolo Reality con l'aggiunta di un punto di domanda particolarmente significativo in questa situazione. Alla luce di questa pandemia, questa serie di dialoghi hanno assunto un significato particolare, perché non sono solo la riflessione su un passato prossimo, un passato molto vicino, ma un passato che oggi sembra lontano. Sono uno sguardo verso il futuro, per cui insieme agli autori, alle persone che abbiamo scelto, stiamo riflettendo sul dove potremo andare oggi e dove potremo andare in futuro. L'idea di partenza era costruire questa riflessione insieme ad alcuni degli artisti che ci hanno accompagnato negli anni, gli artisti a noi più vicini. Siccome però in questi anni abbiamo affrontato temi molto complessi e soprattutto ci piace sempre aprire e stare proprio lì, sul confine tra teatro e realtà, abbiamo pensato che non fosse sufficiente riflettere insieme agli artisti, ma anche dover in qualche modo coinvolgere altri autori, intellettuali, esperti di ambiti specifici che potessero riflettere sui temi scelti. E soprattutto abbiamo deciso che a guardare il lavoro fatto fosse bene che ci fosse uno sguardo a noi vicino, che ci conosce molto bene, ma in qualche modo esterno, che potesse aggiungere qualcosa di nuovo a quello che potremmo dire noi su noi stessi. E quindi abbiamo chiamato Sara Chiappori, giornalista di Repubblica, che ci segue dall'inizio con grande attenzione e competenza, e Renata Viola, il nostro ufficio stampa, che conosce ogni virgola del nostro lavoro, e abbiamo chiamate a strutturare insieme i contenuti di questa serie di dialoghi e stabilire gli inviti e trovare le persone da invitare. Per cui darei la parola a Sara per raccontarci un po' come hanno lavorato.
Grazie Valentina, rubo soltanto giusto un paio di minuti perché sono molto felice, molto felice di lasciare la parola a JENS HILJE e molto curiosa di sentire quello che dirà, un po' lo immagino, ma ho molta voglia di sentirlo, anche perché questo suo incontro, che è anche il prologo ai 4 dialoghi che seguiranno, ha un titolo, la politica dello sguardo, che oltre ad essere un'espressione che racconta molto da vicino il suo lavoro, ha anche ha una magnifica sintesi, perché per il senso della riflessione che sta alla base del convegno che abbiamo pensato, proprio perché la politica dello sguardo chiaramente, oltre a raccontare il lavoro di JENS, riassume anche in un certo senso il tentativo, l'obiettivo che stiamo cercando di mettere in atto con questi incontri, cioè che riguarda anche molto da vicino il senso dell'assunzione della responsabilità dello sguardo. Dunque, reality col punto di domanda, come diceva Valentina. Questo punto di domanda è chiaramente significa molte cose, tra cui da un lato la consapevolezza che l'argomento è vastissimo e complessissimo, sfuggente e insieme inevitabile. Non siamo mai stati tanto sopraffatti dalla realtà come in questo momento storico e nello stesso tempo non ne abbiamo mai dubitato tanto. Ecco, è da questo paradosso e da questa contraddizione forse che è interessante provare ad avviare la riflessione. E che questa riflessione sia cruciale nell'ambito delle arti performative è abbastanza evidente, così come è evidente che il tentativo di mettere al fuoco alcuni punti che abbiamo cercato di identificare potesse aiutarci in qualche modo a condurre una riflessione aperta che non ha l'ambizione ovviamente di rispondere alle domande, ma forse di articolare dei dubbi che ci possano aiutare a condividere del pensiero intorno a questo tema. Dunque, per cercare di muoverci dentro questo orizzonte vastissimo e molto complesso, abbiamo provato a mettere a fuoco alcune parole chiave che ci aiutassero appunto a non perderci nella grande discussione sul contemporaneo, sulla realtà, sui modi della sua rappresentazione, ma ci aiutassero invece proprio ad avvicinarci con lucidità al problema. Dunque abbiamo scelto 4 parole che ci sembravano abbastanza efficaci per circoscrivere l'ambito della riflessione e abbiamo scelto soprattutto di usarle come una sorta di campo aperto su cui mettere a confronto gli artisti che in questi anni hanno collaborato con ZONA K e teorici e uomini di pensiero che si sono occupati degli stessi temi, ma dal punto di vista, dall'angolo prospettico delle loro competenze. Quindi abbiamo immaginato questi 4 dialoghi come una specie di esperimento chimico, forse un po' azzardato, in cui far interagire elementi diversi. Certo, non speriamo di trovare la pietra filosofale con questi 4 dialoghi, ma il tentativo e l'ambizione è quello di portare la riflessione intorno a un concetto così complesso come quello della realtà e delle sue rappresentazioni fuori e oltre l'orizzonte strettamente teatrale. Questo è un po' lo spirito con cui abbiamo cercato di impostare questi dialoghi, accostando anche figure che apparentemente potrebbero sembrarci molto lontane, ma che proprio per questo, anche nella differenza dei linguaggi che metteremo in interazione tra loro, che speriamo di estrarre dei pensieri e magari anche qualche illuminazione. Questo per ora direi che può essere sufficiente. Passerei la parola a Renata, che illustra magari nello specifico date, calendari, incontri e ospiti dei prossimi giorni. Grazie a tutti.
Allora, 4 parole chiave, come dice Sara, e 4 appuntamenti, 4 dialoghi. Il primo si svolgerà martedì 24 e sarà un dialogo tra Dom e il psicanalista italiano Vittorio Lingiardi, tratteranno di paesaggio. Mercoledì 25 invece incontreremo l'agrupazione Signor Serrano e Salvatore Natoli, che parleranno di crisi. Mentre giovedì 26 il regista lettone Walter Silis incontrerà Giuseppe Genna, scrittore italiano, che parleranno di politica. Ultimo appuntamento, venerdì 27, ci sarà il dialogo tra 𝗱𝗶𝗶𝗵𝗶 e Stefano Bartezzaghi, che parleranno di gioco, partecipazione, e tutti gli appuntamenti saranno online sulla pagina Facebook e YouTube di Zona K.
Tra l'altro i dialoghi saranno appunto moderati da Sara, che li accompagnerà tutti. Ma veniamo all'incontro di stasera. Allora, al di là del fatto che la volontà è quella di andare oltre poi il lavoro di Zona K, come gli invitati non parleranno del lavoro che hanno fatto da noi, ma del loro lavoro e del loro lavoro all'interno del mondo della società, l'incontro di stasera è leggermente diverso dagli altri. Come ha detto Sara, è un prologo, ma è un prologo non solo ai 4 dialoghi. Per noi in qualche modo è un prologo quasi al lavoro futuro. Difatti non è un caso che l'ospite di stasera, JENS HILLJE, non fa parte degli artisti, delle persone con cui abbiamo lavorato in passato, ma è un uomo di teatro al quale abbiamo guardato con molta attenzione e ammirazione negli ultimi anni, perché riteniamo che il lavoro che ha fatto nelle diverse situazioni in cui si è trovato e negli ultimi anni al Gorki sia un lavoro che davvero ha rinnovato la scena teatrale berlinese, tedesca ed europea, e per noi è stato non di rado una fonte di ispirazione. JENS HILLJE è oggi co-direttore artistico e drammaturgo, 𝗱𝗶𝗶𝗵𝗶 al Maxim Gorki Teatro di Berlino, e tra i vari premi Leone d'oro alla carriera alla Biennale Teatro del 2019 di Venezia. Jens, hi. Now I have to switch to English.
Ok.
Yes.
Vediamo come facciamo. In
Yes,
inglese.
English. Jens understands very good Italian because he grew up in Italy, but we decided to go on in English to feel as comfortable as possible. But as my English is still a third language, I have to read the questions to you. The first question is connected to the fact that we are not only directors of Zona K, but we founded Zona K more or less 10 years ago. And obviously we founded a place for different reasons that I'm not able to tell you now. But we would be very curious to know from you that co-founded 3 different theater houses that today are for us cultural operators, a kind of mythical, I would say, theaters that, like few others, have been able to interpret the spirit of the time, die Baracke, die Schaubühne und das Gorki Theater. What needs, what urgencies did you start from when you founded those houses or when you entered the new direction of these houses? And why founding a new place and not just collaborate with an existing one? And why move from one to another?
Okay, I'm very happy that you are having me there in Milan, as I grew up in Milan when I was a child, so I understand Italian, but my practice in speaking is limited here up in Berlin. But I'm happy to speak to you about my experiences here in Berlin as a theater maker. And I would like to start with a concept. If I look back to the 3 theaters that I have started, I realized there is a concept overall that is always has been important to me, that is heterotopias, which is a term invented by Michel Foucault, describing spaces that are different, another space, heterotopia. It might be a hospital, it might be a brothel, it might be a theater. It's a space where you can act and interact inspired by different rules than you have to or can or are allowed to outside in mainstream society. So theater always should be heterotopia. And when I started, I would like to go back a moment when I started doing theater in Bavaria after we moved there from Milan. The very first theater I started in the age of 15, it was back in the 80s, was taking a traditional Bavarian pub. As you might know, every Bavarian pub has a stage, famous during 𝗱𝗶𝗹𝗵𝗶. So it was taking a traditional place, turn it into a space of theater, pretending to do a traditional form of theater, but introducing into the traditional form and the traditional space a new content, a new perspective, something else you want to tell, different stories. So it was an attempt to have in a very conservative area, in a pub, a kind of revolutionary, subversive theater. That was my first encounter with theater. And the concept of heterotopia has been the inspiration since for the founding of the theaters that came then. The Baracke in Berlin was indeed a baracke. It was a working space. We added some containers. We turned it into a neutral space, completely black, outside white, black and white. A new space, almost virgin. Outside some containers that had a bar, a beer garden outside in the garden, and the theater space in the black box. And this was in the 90s. It was a neutral, virgin space where we could invite inspiration from outside. And it made it start with a lot of input from authors, actors, directors, a new spirit of theater that came from Britain then in the 90s. In your face, very wild, very politically aggressive theater. I would name authors like Mark Ravenhill and Sarah Kane, who became important to us there. And they were reflecting in their work that we brought into Berlin and Germany, an experience that was important because it was the mainstream thinking then. It was challenging by the means of theater and art the idea of neoliberalism that was introduced in the 70s, 80s by Margaret Thatcher, saying a thing like, there is no such thing as society. So what theater enabled itself to do was to criticize a hegemony of thinking by telling different stories, giving new voices a place, and inventing a new practice in a new space. The second step then was to bring this concept to a much bigger, more traditional place like the Schaubühne. New voices, new authors, new acting, new stories, and to change it into a place where something new should happen. From today, I would say we managed partly. What we did with the Schaubühne, my second theater, is to modernize the space. It became a heterotopia, yes and no, because it stayed the same old institution in a way. That's why it was necessary to start for me a third place, the Gorki, where maybe it would be possible to combine the experiences and the attempts undertaken in the Baroque with a traditional institution like a major state theater like the Schaubühne in one theater. And that then became the experiment of the Gorki later on.
The motivation, the text that they read during the Venice Triennale to tell what you got the prize is interesting because it quotes the heart, I would say, of your work, and I would read it to go to the next question. Con grande coerenza ha cercato di scoprire e lanciare nuovi autori per la scena, occupandosi di scegliere, per i teatri nei quali ha lavorato e lavora, attori giovanissimi, affiancandoli a registi altrettanto giovani o già affermati. Grazie al suo operato ha contribuito alla creazione di un nuovo pubblico, proveniente da differenti ceti sociali ed aree geografiche. Un risultato sorprendente ed esemplare, capace forse di mettere in discussione la logica commerciale a cui spesso si piega il teatro oggi. This motivation emphasizes your ability to generate community and speak to new and different audiences from different social classes and geographical origins. How did you achieve these results, and how did you work with young artists and young people?
So the second concept I would like to introduce in our talk is the one of cultural hegemony by Antonio Gramsci. So it's now combining Foucault and Gramsci. So how to establish spaces that have a heterotropian potential and in the same moment claim that you have the hegemony. One heterotropian motive I love is, or let's say one thing that artists are allowed as they belong to a different space than mainstream society, is to be a trickster, to play tricks. So even as an artistic director, you should be inspired and allowed to play tricks. So what we did with the Gorki is to take a very representative theater in the center of the capital of Germany, in Berlin, from the 19th century, and change the architecture, which is on the other side of the street of the former Royal Opera House of Berlin and Prussia, the State Opera, the most representative theater we have in Germany. We have this little building from the 19th century, and we changed that building into a different idea of theater, claiming in the same moment that we are kind of the theater, kind of pretending to be the new national theater in our little theater, by saying that we, and if I say we, it's a group of artists, theater makers, playwrights, actors, directors, dramaturgs, stage designers, all the people that work in theaters. A very diverse group combined of what we call in Germany New Germans, half of them not having a family name that sounds German, a mixture of religion, of culture, of where we come from. The new theater that is representing the whole of the community, which is constructed by a lot of small communities. That was the basic idea of Gorki. So we have a very big overall idea, and we have a practice that is allowing heterotopian spaces to be created, evolve, and have a practice. So Gorki is has a main stage, and it has an independent autonomous studio, the Gorki studio. That is kind of, for me, always has been taking on the tradition of the Baroque, while the main stage is the traditional stage, 19th century. The studio, the new space, black box. So you have a space And then you bring in new artists, a new generation of artists. You invite people who maybe wouldn't go into doing theater, who would head for film, where they would easier and get access and be able to express their voices. So to create a new audience, you have to create a new artistic outcome, a new representation, so that the new audience can find itself in the stories and the actors and the artists that do the theater shows on the stage. So you have to do both things at the same moment. You have to make new artists emerge, develop them, a new generation of artists that is much more diverse than the generation before, at least in Germany, to create a new audience, a young audience that came to the theater through the studio and then makes the next step into the traditional space, on stage and in the audience. So it's creating passages between different spaces within one architecture, which is the theater complex, which is created through a combination of different spaces who have different artistic policies. The third thing we have is Gorki X, which is a work that does theater projects, which is reaching out to non-professionals. That is schools, that is communities, it is a lot of people who normally wouldn't go to theater. So we have the youngest audience created out of a lot of work we have in exchange with schools that are very close connected to those young artists. And it always has as the major and most important task to make art. So it's not social work, but it's art, what they do and what they are all invited to do. The young artists and the non-professionals, the audience. So what is created is a growing together, an exchange of audience and artists in the same moment, in the same space. So they create a new theater that is always combined. If I say theater, it's the space, which is the stage, it's the artists, and it's the spectators. All those three come together, and they create a new practice. The experience of reflecting yourself, reflecting the society you live in, through experiencing a piece of art that is presented to you, which is a different way of communication than a purely political one. So it always says, first the art, at the end, the art.
This brings me directly to the next question. Actually, I would like to speak much longer with you about this concept that you told us of provoking and pretending to be like the new theater overall. Like it's not only one new theater in town, but we are the new theater, which I found a very fascinating idea. It's kind of how can you make a revolution if you don't pretend it to be a revolution? So, and very new for me actually, because we love understatement, and this overstatement is very interesting. But unfortunately, I think it's something we'll have to talk in future talks. Because what you mentioned about communities and this Gorki X, if I'm right, brings me directly to the next question, which is goes more into this community building and is attached to some words: participation, audience development, empowerment, social engagement. These are words that are very important to me and also for the work of ZONA K. But in a way, in Italy, they are so frequent in the cultural world, in theater world, it seems that you can not longer work without these concepts, and they almost become annoying or empty. If you use them too much, they lack of content. And I ask myself if this continuous pushing art towards social tasks is due to lack of funds. Though I'm not sure, because in the Anglo-Saxon world, where they for sure have more funds than in Italy, these terms are very present. How is it in Germany, where the political role of theater has always been very explicit and strong? And what do these terms mean to you personally? And last part of the question, what happens to the freedom of the artist in this content of social tasks of art?
To answer that question, I would like to introduce a third concept that is important for me. That is soziale Plastik, which is a concept, artistic concept by 𝗱𝗶𝗶𝗵𝗶. So social sculpture, and it is an idea which opened for the visual arts the entry into new dimension of doing performances, of understanding social action as a piece of art, and was opening a whole new world to the visual arts when it was introduced, and was connected to all the achievements of the visual arts in the 70s, 80s, were transgressive, opening borders, opening spaces, opening ways of working. So soziale Plastik, you can use it, again, you can use the concept as a trick. Again, it's a trickster thing. You kind of turn it around. When you have the feeling that what you do with non-professionals or what you do as a socially engaged theater work, if you change the perspective and you say that society or a situation which is social is a piece of art, and I perceive it and I reflect on it as it was a piece of art, then you already have a path into something that is more than just social work. So the bar of a theater, the bar of our studio theater Gorki, Studio Ja, has been always thought and conceptualized as soziale Plastik, which means it's a piece of art what we do. The people in the bar, drinking, talking, seeing a show, coming out, applauding. Every interaction that is taking place within the theater space, from your entry into the theater space, seeing the show, drinking, talking, having fun, dancing, meeting people, talking, everything all together is a piece of art, and which is a trick in order to read and talk about it in a different way. So your social practice becomes maybe a performance. So you kind of introduce a change of perspective that kind of allows you to see things differently and open up the way how you perceive reality, because you have a different concept of describing reality, social reality. It's a trick. It's a trick that is inspiring and working. And again, audiences are enjoying it a lot. And artists who work in a rather socially engaged way don't feel limited, but liberated by it. At least that's what the practice that we have been fighting for, have been discussing about, was aiming to. It was the idea, and that was quite successful in the practice.
So is this what you mean for POLITIK, BLICKE. I mean, you mentioned this concept in a, I'm quoting a previous interview where you described your work as a dramaturg. So translated, it would be politics of the gaze. So what is the relationship then, through this concept, between art and reality for you? And what is the political action, the possible political action of art on reality? Is it just a way of looking at it, or is there a way of interacting, of changing it?
Okay, no, so now it's about my own concept, idea. As I mentioned before, I started doing theater in the 80s, and I grew up with this sentence, there is no such thing as society, which was the political program for the last 40 years, which is now really in crisis, because it seems maybe to be all about society. Politic of the gases means that we are no isolated individuals. It means we're always constructed seeing each other. So we are always society. Every single human being is always society when it acts, speaks, watches something. Because you always feel the gaze of the other. You always send out a gaze defining another person. And there we come to categories like class, race, gender, sexual identity. And if you have a political approach like we're feminists, then you kind of always see who defines me, who kind of oppresses me by defining me with his or her gaze. So society is constructed by the gazes of the people, how they watch, how they look at each other. And this is where theater comes in as an artistic strategy to reflect those gazes. And maybe by reflecting them, making them conscious and making people able to change their gaze, to change the perspective, and therefore the way they see things. Because if they start looking at other people in a different way, things really start to change. Because your perception of reality changes, and you are able to change your behavior. And so on a very small scale already there, a change and an emancipation, liberation can take place, can start at least. And people, my experience in the last 20, 30 years of making theater is people are so happy about being able to change their gaze, seeing new things, changing their thoughts, changing their mind, being able to see the world in a new way, that it becomes a practice that is joyful and therefore creative. So if you change the gaze of a spectator as an artist, this becomes an exchange that once started won't stop anymore, and therefore is able to change realities by acknowledging new realities through the stories that are now told on stage that are different from the stories that used to be told on stage before. And therefore, acknowledging new realities creates a new reality of society.
That's also quite new to me and quite optimistic, I would say, because I always have the feeling that people go to theater or to cinema or to be confirmed in their thoughts. Like, I always am afraid that people will like a show if it's a radical show only if, or let's say a different view only if they already kind of agree with this different view. And so if you speak out of experience, it's a very positive signal. Yeah, you do speak out of experience. People change their minds.
The point is, if you're able to change a thought, your way of thinking, seeing things, you feel free and you feel alive. And if people experience this confrontation with art at the moment of feeling alive, it is an experience they don't want to miss anymore. That's why, at least in Berlin, theaters are full. People, even now in the academy, as soon as people could buy tickets for theaters, they were sold out. People immediately wanted to go to a place where they could experience something challenging their thoughts. Because not changing your thoughts is a sign of your life is going about to end. You feel alive if you're still changing. That's the door where we theater people can always enter, because people enjoy it enormously to feel alive. Of course, we do.
Great. I hope you're right. So I go directly to the last question, which is also connected to what you are saying, because if we speak about the present, it's impossible not to, at least for the end. What is your gaze of the world today? What is your blick on the world of today? And what narratives are urgently needed for the here and now?
I think that right now, a sentence like there is no such thing as society, which was kind of the revolutionary sentence of the reign of neoliberalism for the last 40 years, has come to an end. Because the experience that we collectively, globally are now having is there is nothing but society. Everything is society. We are so much connected by being forced into isolation through the shutdowns, the lockdowns. We realize that the most precious thing is coming together, is relating to each other, and that if this is taken away from us, we really start to appreciate this. So the very new thing at the moment is, in the next years, in the next decade, I'm sure it will be all about society, 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 which creates the task how to deal with that, what is coming there. Because it opens the question with a new necessity. Okay, which society are we going to live in the next years? And so the political debates, the artistic debates, all the debates we are going to have in the next years are going to be with a new urgency, with a new need about what society do we want to live in? Because if it comes to a situation of such a health crisis, only society can save you. A working, a functioning society. So we are going to have a lot of attempts on trying to find a new idea of society we all can agree on. That is going to be the fight and the battle of the next years to come. And working on the narrative that tells the story of a new society, that will be a very exciting and challenging task for everyone, and especially for artists and theater people to be a part of. And it's starting already now, I think. Yeah, because you can have a conservative idea of society and you can have a very progressive idea of society. And that is why I think theater will have a very important, very small, but very important role in the coming discourse, discussion about where to go after passing through the current crisis.
If I may go a bit out of the main path of our talk, it's also that we have been very much directed in this crisis from the government. I mean, we didn't really make any choice with staying at home or accepting the lockdown. We were governed and we got direction and we followed them. Okay, we decided to follow them. Do you think something like this is, can we move to personal responsibility in this? Can we, when governments will stop giving us the directions to follow, will it be our responsibility to take care of that?
Yes, two observations maybe. First, we overestimate, and that's what we see in the second wave now, what governments can do and are able to do, because almost every European government is showing that they are not that good at handling the second wave as they might have thought. Even the German government, the Swiss government, who thought they were kind of very good handling the first wave. So it's really the society with our responsibilities which are related. Responsibility in itself has the relationship. I am responsible to another person. I am responsible to the persons around me. So that's the core experience we all have, is we can't be alone and it's difficult to be together. So it's dangerous to be together. So that's why responsibility as the key ability to organize a society has become so important. Only the society can fight against losing control in the current situation. That's the first observation. The second is it's been strong societies and prepared societies who dealt with the health crisis in the best way so far. So we should stop watching like the rabbit to the snake to the government and organize ourselves, because we can't rely on them. We only can rely on each other.
Yes, you still are an optimist. You confirm my impression that you are a great optimist. Last question, but it's due to what happened tonight, because we started, before going online, we commented how difficult it is to have a meeting such this online. And it's just very different than talking to you personally and having the audience in front of us. It's very strange and weird. For me, it's the first time. And are you interested in the possibilities of technology? Do you think that's a path to go as well? I mean, are we discovering also new ways that can become interesting and not only annoying or not only embarrassing?
I mean, of course, I'm part of a generation that is not a digital native. So it's new territory for me, but I start to get used to it. But in the same moment, meeting each other in real space, in real time, has become such a precious thing that it will only become stronger, even though we have at the same moment, we will learn how to cooperate and communicate in this new world of digitalization, like we do it now, right now with this conference and talk. But I don't think that it is going to weaken the real experience, which only can take place in real time with real persons in a real space. So it's going to be a new kind of dialectic experience we're going to have, where, of course, that's what we do right now here, becomes a common thing, and meeting like in real becomes very luxurious, very important thing to us. That's why I think people will love to go to the theater. I mean, a major thing we had in Berlin, I mean, what is happening right now in Berlin is, of course, we have a collapse of the club scene, but of course we have a blooming of all the illegal parties taking place where people meet nonetheless. Just shows what human beings and our species is really longing for, even if it is so incredibly dangerous.
Sure, sure. That means that it's time to greet you and to tell you that we are looking forward to meet you in person. Although I have to admit that I'm starting to like the talk right now, right at the end. I could go on for a while.
Yeah.
No, but really, thank you very much. And we really hope we can meet you soon in Berlin, but also in Milan to have you here.
Thank you for having me and having this nice dialogue. In the end, it's really feels like an exchange that is starting here. So meet you soon in Berlin and in Milan, and goodbye and thank you.
Goodbye to you. Grazie a tutti, grazie a Sara, grazie a Renata, grazie allo staff di Zona K e tutta la tecnica, grazie a voi che ci avete seguito e ci vediamo domani con il primo dialogo. Buona serata.